Hi, this is Greg Anderson, and this is the Living in Carver County podcast. It's an insider's conversation with the people who make Carver County the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And I'm really excited today because this has been an interview in a long time coming, and it's with the new District 112 Superintendent, Erin Rathke. Erin, congratulations on moving from interim to, I guess, what's it, regular superintendent?
Regular, that's
Right,
right.
and so I'd like to start off with maybe you just sharing a little bit about your background, where'd you grow up, where'd you go to, in this case, certainly where'd you go to school, and what was your career path that led you to this point?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Greg. I'm really excited to be here, and I am excited to serve Eastern Carver County. I'm not a stranger to this area. My grandma and grandpa raised their family in Mayer, Minnesota. And so I was just talking to a bunch of community leaders and talking about being on Lake Waconia, because that was the place you went when you were a teenager and drove around. And I used a swear word, but we'd spin out donuts on Lake Waconia. So I'm not a stranger to this
Everybody in
area.
Minnesota knows what the actual word for that is.
Yeah, silly. But I said it during community leaders, and I was like, oh, I gotta try to come up with a not a swear word. Um, anyway, so I am from Carver County for just a portion of my life, and my dad was a teacher and a principal, and we did move to Michigan, which is where we lived for a period of time as well, and then came back to Minnesota so that my dad could come back to Carver County, and did high school and college in Minnesota. And so really enjoyed this area and know it's a great place to raise a family. And then I spent a lot of time teaching in Anoka Hennepin School District. And so I've been in really large school districts in suburban areas and urban areas, which has been has been such a great fortune and experience for me. So I was a teacher in Anoka Hennepin, and then moved on to Minneapolis Public Schools, where I was a teacher, an instructional coach. I was a assistant principal, a principal, and then came out to Eastern Carver County as the assistant superintendent and now the superintendent. So I've been in a handful of districts and have really enjoyed my career, and have just had wonderful opportunities to be with great leaders, to have great bosses, and to be with, hundreds and hundreds of students over the course of my tenure as an educator.
So where did you do your undergraduate?
I was a basketball player, and I was at Concordia St. Paul, where I met my husband, who played football and did some baseball. And so we were college athletes, and so really just really enjoyed that. It was a small private college where we were able to have lots of great friends, and have an experience of being a college athlete for a handful of years. So Concordia St. Paul.
Go Golden Bears. My
Yeah,
my
they
nephew
weren't
went there.
they were the Comets, at one point,
Oh,
and
no
then
kidding.
moved to the Golden Bears. Yep.
Yeah, well, there's a Chaska connection there too, because Seafoam Stadium, the Mark Hansen, who's the CEO of Seafoam, has his companies relocated to Chaska a few years ago. So,
Okay.
so yeah, we spend a lot of Saturdays over there. It's another Golden Bear first down. All right, so then you did, and then your graduate work then?
Yeah, then I was at St. Cloud State. So I got my master's degree in social justice at St. Cloud State. So I want to do something a little different than just a master's in education, and felt like I needed something to expand my thinking. There was this new program there, and I was really excited about it. And then I did they call it your 6-year degree, so your principal's licensure. I did that also at St. Cloud. Um, and then I have my doctorate from Marymount University in Virginia.
Wow, okay. So, all right, so you spent a lot of time in the classroom, so I have to ask the question this way. Well, how long were you interim superintendent, just to remind people?
About 6 months.
6 months. Okay. All right. And so from your vantage point right now, if you were looking at the district overall and you were giving it a report card, what kind of a grade would you? Are you familiar with the solutions focus? Because that's where we're going with this.
Okay.
So what would
What
be the
grade would I
grade?
give?
Yes.
Well, I that's a great question, and I love that. I will say we are A+ district. I just will. The people here, and maybe you're smiling and laughing, but
I'm
One
not
of the things
laughing yet, but
One of the things that I love about our district is our community is so supportive of our educators and of the district, and they want it to be great because they want their community great. And I believe that strong schools is strong communities, and I think our community believes that too. So that is one thing I would say makes our district A plus. We have incredible educators that are really committed to what's happening in our district. And it's across all schools, across all levels. And so that is another benefit that you just can't, it's just second to none. We have incredible leaders in our district. We have veteran principals and assistant principals and deans, and we have recruited incredible people who want to come and work here. And I think that combination has just made us really special. And I really believe that people want to be part of our team. And I just want to give a huge shout out to our cabinet district level leaders. They have been amazing partners. We have run a little short at the district office, of course, as the interim superintendent. I didn't have an assistant superintendent. And so everyone chipped in because they love the district and love our kids. And I just also want to say the opportunity to have two high schools where we have students that have double the opportunities, that's a commitment that our community made. That's a big deal. And we have double the opportunities for all of our kids. I mean, when you just go down the line and start listing those things off, I believe it makes our district exceptional. And it makes the community really strong, and people should be excited about going to school here. It is a great place to be.
So what specifically are you talking about when you say double the opportunities? What does that translate to?
So when you think about when you have a large district, which we are, and you have one large high school, you have one basketball team, that's 10 kids. You have, one act play, that is 30 kids. And in our situation, we have two one acts, we have two varsity basketball teams, we have two football teams. And so our kids are getting double the opportunity to play, experience, be exposed, to be the star, to be on the field, to be on the stage. That's a big deal. It's hard when you're competing against 250 kids to try to make 10 players on the basketball team.
Mhm.
And our kids are just getting a lot more opportunities.
It's funny that because that's literally the exact example I use when people are looking at districts, and not to put not to be from a subjective standpoint of right or wrong, we try to talk about fit a lot. That there's, if you go into Fleet Farm and you try on a pair of gloves, they don't fit. It doesn't make you wrong, it doesn't make the gloves wrong. But when you're comparing, for example, adjacent districts, that basketball example is literally the one that I use when I'm explaining to people when they're looking at it from a, deciding where they want to live is okay. There's one notion: if iron sharpens iron, and my kid's going to go and he's going to be, he's going to thrive in a much more competitive environment. And then there's the other side is, look, if they're not at least a D2 prospect, they're not going to, they're not even going to make the team,
Yeah.
just because of the sheer numbers. And then you take that same principle and apply it across, like you said, the plays and DECA and speech and, what have you, so that opportunities. And I thought that's where you were going with that, but I just wanted to make sure to clarify that.
Well, and let's be honest, it's not hurting our opportunities. I mean, we've been to state at both high schools in multiple sports since I've been here. And so it certainly isn't making us less competitive. I think it's exposing more of the talent for our kids.
Yeah, Chan's certainly having a moment, this last year.
Yes, they did.
And
So fun.
and
Well, and
and
Chaska's girls basketball team was at state during the pandemic. I mean, there's just been
well,
a
and the
show
football
of
team a few
excellent.
years ago. It's interesting how good that feeder program is, because these kids all are playing together, and then as they, you get to a point where now they kind of have that fork, and they're going to go to one high school or the other. But that youth program has basically fed both of these programs for the last, dozen years.
Right.
So it's pretty
Well,
exciting.
and I know we talk about athletics all the time, but I don't know about you, but I went to the One Acts in the spring, and I mean, A Wrinkle in Time, and I'm gonna forget the name of it. It was a comedy. I'm so sorry because it was the funniest play I've seen kids do, but our kids are so talented, and they're getting exposure in theater, and then, being able to meet with those students later and how they're using that to go to college, and things that they're excited about and love and are passionate about. The Play That Goes Wrong. That was the name of it. I got it.
Good save.
Good save, but oh my goodness. I mean, our kids were so talented and hilarious, and they're going to college and are going to be in theater programs where they're going to make friends and be able to be exposed to more people. That is an excellent opportunity for our kids.
Okay. All right. So A plus. I was smiling,
A
but
plus.
so I'm gonna challenge you on some things that I hear about, okay?
Okay.
That people in the course of conversation. One of them was something that we were dealing with for the last few years was, we're in a school district that I think is unique. It's a little bit like Minnesota. I said Minnesota's unique. We talk about houses. It's like, you've got places that are warmer and places that are colder, but you don't have a lot of places where your house has to function at 20 below or 100 above. And that applies to the district in the sense that you've got kids rolling up to high school in a $70,000, you know, uh, tricked out Jeep, and you've got kids that are on that have food insecurities and don't know where they're maybe going to be sleeping. And so with that big of a range, um, there's going to be challenges. So how do you feel like the district's doing? We're going to break this down. You gave an A plus overall, but we're going to chunk it into little parts. How are we
Yep.
doing on that? Um, and I know diversity, equity, and inclusion has become sort of a hot topic for people. It's become more politicized than really it probably should be. But how are we doing in that respect from your perspective?
The range of student. Well, certainly the
Well, how the
pandemic.
district's addressing those issues.
Okay. Well, I certainly know that Carver County and Eastern Carver County is increasing in diversity. We listened and know that it's actually one of the fastest communities growing in its diversity. And so there's always challenges when that starts to happen, where people are their normal is shaken a little bit. And so I think we know that the district went through that. And we still have work to do. So I want to say that I want to first say that 100%, there's always going to be work to do as we start to serve a more diverse population. But what I will say is the district has centered all students. We've been able to talk about what is the desired daily experience of all of our kids, as well as how are our kids experiencing it who maybe have food insecurities or are students of color. And you're right, they are not all having the same experience here, but we're facing it head on. We're talking about it. Our leaders are talking about it. Our teachers are talking about it. Our community is talking about it. And so that diversity, equity, and inclusion that I think people were worried about talking about at one time is not something that the district is not worried about talking about. We're talking about it. If you listen to our board meetings, we're talking about it at board meetings. And so the culture is shifting for us to be able to better serve all of our students. And again, there's still work ahead of us, but we are certainly not running from it.
Can you talk about that daily experience? There, by the way, the website's terrific. In terms of I really love the infographics, but one of the kind of commonalities in terms of the daily experience between, the students, the family, and the staff. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I want to be able to give a little bit of background because I think what's happened is people think that's our strategic plan, and it isn't. It's a portion of our strategic plan, and how it came about is what makes it so special and why we should be talking about it. Because we surveyed our community, we talked to students, we had focus groups, we went back and made sure that it was reflective of the demographics of the students that we serve. We met with teachers, staff members, because remember, teachers are a large portion of our employee base, but there are tons of groups that serve our students and make sure that our district functions. We met with nutrition services and custodians and bus drivers and heard about what their perfect day experience, work environment, teacher environment would be. And
Mhm.
then we scoured hundreds of pieces of data, and we rolled it up into these key priorities. And they are, like you said, they're similar. I want to be seen, valued, and heard. I mean, absolutely. I think people have a really high value of that. But our students want to be seen, valued, and heard. Our parents want to be, our staff members want to be.
Well,
And then
and then
for,
trusted and respected, you
yep,
had on there. I think it's terrific.
it is. And one of the things that I love about the parent or our caregiver desired daily experiences, they want to feel like they're seen, valued, and heard, but they most importantly want their student to feel seen, valued, and heard. And does that match for them? When they show up, do they feel that way? And then do they believe that their students feel that way? Our students said they want to have fun with their friends. That is a key component to education in a school experience, is being able to have interactions with their students, and they want to know their teachers and they want their teachers to know them. Our parents talked a lot about that as well, and they want strong, effective communication. So thank you for pointing out our website. I'll give a shout out to Kaylee and the communications department. They are small and mighty. Our teachers also want timely communication, as well as strong professional development, and they want to be inspired by their leadership. And so I think those are things that everybody desires at their place of employment or where they send their children. But how it came about in the way that we cycled that desired daily experience, I think, is what makes it really special. So I want to make sure we keep it alive and that we talk about that, because it was really about elevating voice and engagement in our community. So when you think about goals of the superintendent, community engagement, that's an example of a way in which many of our key stakeholders and collaborators were part of being engaged in the district.
Okay. All right. And so you mentioned the the diversity, but it talks about, where there's a growth component here, where uh, people there's something I deal with a lot in my day job is people will say, we're just tired of all these new people coming in. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
you moved in 20 years ago and you were new people, and the what's happening now is the manifestation of plans that were put in place in the 90s, the comprehensive
Sure.
plans. And we don't have 212, so you can get over and get little Kyle, Cody, and Cameron new soccer shoes. It's 212 is in because this is the growth corridor. And that
Right.
everything that's happening now was basically preordained. But with that in mind, the district, you're talking about some significant, despite the 2020 decline with students, but the longer term perspective is that the district's going to grow rather significantly. So, what are some of the key components that you're putting in place to try to effectively navigate that?
Well, I think that there were a lot of plans in place prior to the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic has shifted how the district is seeing their enrollment and seeing how we are going to serve the community. We'll continue to partner with the community, our community leaders, and make sure that we are able to serve our community. I think that there are some really tough decisions ahead of us as we continue to grow. And how that looks. It will depend on where that growth happens. We continue to partner with our buildings and grounds, and so making sure that our buildings are top notch, that they're serving our families, making sure that we have enough. For example, Carver is booming, and Carver Elementary, we added on and made sure that we're able to serve the population that is coming to Carver Elementary. So we'll continue to look at and assess where the growth is happening. The birth rate is down. And so I think that the pandemic has shifted some of the growth because maybe people are having less children than they once did. The economy has changed. And so that is changing birth rates. And so I think that there is a projection. And I think we need to assess, because I don't think people were prepared to what the pandemic was going to do to this area or enrollment or birth rates. So we have a lot of assessing that we still need to do, but we will continue to monitor and make sure. And the district went through such a huge growth spurt, and we were building buildings so quickly. It's helpful for us to settle and look and assess and make sure that we're making really fiscally responsible decisions on behalf of our community, and making sure that we aren't overbuilding or underbuilding, but that we're able to serve at a good rate that the community can trust what we're doing in the district in terms of building.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Carver Elementary. I mean, you know where the growth is going to go because of the comp plans, and you got national builders in. I mean, Victoria's just is continuing to grow, and certainly Carver with all the with the expansion and the annexation of the townships and things, and so I'm guessing you'll have a certain amount of loss to homeschooling or private school or what have you, but the brunt of it's still going to happen in terms of with where the new homes are being built. You mentioned a couple things you're talking about fiscally being fiscally responsible for trying to kind of balance that, not overbuilding and underbuilding. There doesn't appear to be any additional space to expand Carver Elementary. So I know there's a lot of questions. Is East Union, what's going on with that building?
So that building was sold.
Oh, it
And
was.
so we
Okay.
no longer, yep, so we no longer have that building. So East Union is not an option at this time.
Okay. And is there, so the growth that'll happen, if it happens there, is the spot, is it the area off Big Woods Boulevard where was that the next reasonable, I mean, from a probability stand, I know you can't say 100%, but
Yep.
from a probability
Yep.
standpoint, is that where the next elementary would go?
I imagine that the land that we own and we're projecting where it says the future of an Eastern Carver County school will, I anticipate that that will be the location.
Okay. All right. What other capital projects are kind of in the works?
Yeah, well, I think one thing is if you drive through the district right now, summer is such a big time in school districts. There's 11 weeks to get construction done or cleaning done or get ready for our kids again the next year. And so you can see really clearly East has had a huge construction project. So they did last year was a lot hot. And now they're finishing up East. West is starting to have a major construction. You'll see, that parking lot in La Academia and West is closed in that field. And so those are the sites that we have a lot of work going on. Clover's getting a new roof. I mean, we have a lot of construction going on as you drive through the district. Jim Munzenmeyer, head of buildings and grounds, is incredible and so student-centered, but puts together a pretty high quality and major movement in the district over these 11 weeks as we don't serve students fully.
Got it. Well, actually, we have an Airbnb, and one of our guests that's here for the week is working on the track. So he's up from
Sure.
Missouri, so he's staying here.
Yep.
Um, as the district grows, I know in the past when we had these kind of growth spurts, there was a lot of controversy around the remapping of the districts for the elementary schools. Is that something that was that one of the tools for managing the growth, or kind of the redistribution of students? I mean, you said you've got irregular birth rates and varying population increases because of as a byproduct of COVID and things. Is that and what's the thought process around that, and how do you approach that? Because I know that can be. We had a friend who was on the school board, and I thought this was really crummy. She had somebody had their kid call her and say, "Why are you making me leave my friends?" Uh,
Oh, yeah.
and I said,
Well,
what you should tell them is if your mommy and daddy really loved you, they'd buy you a new house. But
well,
I was kidding, but I thought that was a lousy thing to do, you know. But
yep. I think rebrown changing boundaries is always a hot topic in school districts, not just in Eastern Carver County. Other districts have had to do it. It is the way in which we have to function in terms to use our buildings at full capacity. At this time, I don't have a plan for that. I anticipate that we may have to have those conversations as enrollment increases, as we look at, again, the building rates. There may be a possibility of that. That's always, the community should want us to look at that critically because we want to use our buildings to full capacity. And we don't want to do that without our community. So I anticipate we would need to have a work group, community engagement, and be able to have conversations. That is always an emotional and challenging thing for a community, because you're right. Now my friends that I used to go to school with, now I go there and they go here. And, it's hard, and it usually impacts our elementary students, because our middle school students start to experience that in pathways where they start to, 7 goes to 3, 3 goes to 2. And so that does happen as our kids progress K-12, but it is really hard. And so I don't want to minimize that. That is a really challenging conversation for communities to do. And right now we don't have any plans for that, but I am certain that is something we'll have to evaluate at some time.
Well, because the growth doesn't happen proportionately, right? I mean, you're going
Correct.
to have all of this growth in Carver. And so there's going to, now it's like a snake eating a rabbit. You've got all these kids coming in all of a sudden, and you've got to try to distribute that, because the alternative is you build another building, but those buildings are forever then.
Yep.
And so I just wanted you to talk about that a little bit, because people tend to see those things in a sort of myopic way, and without having your perspective, I think is helpful to how those things are being addressed.
Well,
So,
and thank you for bringing that up. And it is, you're right. So you're talking about it from a really logical perspective. I'm going to talk about it from a logical and fiscal perspective. You're right. Growth doesn't happen, distributed equally across the district. And when parents are talking about their child and their most precious thing in their life, that is what they're thinking about. And that I want to honor that. That is a big deal. And that is really hard. And friends and relationships. And I know moms in my community and dads in my community. And, those things that create bonds and relationships and create such valuable community experiences are the things that people are fighting for when they have a hard time with that. So I really want to honor that. It's a big deal.
mhm.
And we don't want to do that thoughtlessly. We want to do that with people. We don't want to do that to them. And the community also should hold us to the expectation of, the fiscal responsibility of the capacity of our buildings.
Sure. Well, it occurs to me that your job has kind of three sort of separate kind of pillars, if you will. Obviously the student, the learning, the rigor of the academics, the whole student experience. Then it seems like you've got the public engagement, engaging with the parents, engaging with the community, and then the fiscal responsibility. And so there's sort of a, Venn diagram of where there's overlap, but they're also kind of separate, um, uh, not schools of thought, but separate objectives, and metrics. Um, where do you think you're the strongest?
Well, I guess what I'm going to say is, well, one, I love to engage with people, and there is a high value in our community right now about being out in the community and listening and talking. And as a new superintendent, I think that is something that I'm going to be able to do. I want to do. I think it's a great opportunity for our organization for me to be able to do that. So I think that I am good at that, and I am committed to that for our community, because it's a really high value right now, particularly for our school board. And again, what I've heard as well. But I stepped out of I was the executive director of teaching and learning and the assistant superintendent. And so I do feel like I have a really strong handle on what's happening in our district from a learning perspective, from an adjustment around personalized learning, our strategic plan. And so I would say those are the two places that I kind of live in my strengths. It is critical that to be fiscally and resourcefully prudent in our district. And certainly our district is coming into some really challenging times around cost containment, needing to really think through that. But because I have such a strong handle on the academic pieces of the organization, I think that I can balance that out, because I think truly one of the things that I want to do around engagement is talk to our community about what their wish list is. What are they excited about growing inside of our organization? And I think there's some opportunities for us to do some growing of programs or, marketing our school district. And that is going to require me to be fiscally responsible through what looks like some cost containment coming.
So with that in mind, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the teacher contract and teacher
Yeah.
contracts and how that applies, because obviously that's the execution of the student experience, but also the fiscal and responsibility and accountability. So to what extent would you like to address that?
Sure. Well, certainly our community and our teachers experienced, some difficult, I'm going to say difficult negotiations. I think it was statewide and nationwide. It is what it is. And I'm excited for us to move on from that story and make sure that we are thinking about all of our employee groups. And so, like I shared earlier, the teachers are really critical to the work. They're in front of our students. They are the ones that deliver a desired daily experience for our kids consistently every single day in front of them. And so I really want to honor that. And we have tons of other people and employee groups in our organization that are still negotiating. And that is something that has been a really critical part of this year's story, last year's story, I should say, last year's story. So I'm excited about moving on from that narrative and making sure that we can go back to the centering of students and making sure that we're addressing our climate. It's really important that we have a strong, healthy climate in our organization. I think that's the seedbed of good learning. And so I'm excited to get back to that and making sure that that's our story versus, a tough negotiations.
Sure. Well, you mentioned climate, and it's a nice segue into what I wanted to ask you about. Um, I've got a lot of friends that are teachers. I have people that were in education who've left because the climate's changing.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school. The nuns would smack you with a ruler. The principal used to have his class ring, and he would turn the stone around, and so the stone was on his hand. Then he would slap me on top of the head if I was talking out of turn. So you have that extreme, right? And
Yep.
now you've got a situation where somebody was just telling me like a week ago, a teacher, and they were saying how, there's this gaslighting that the parents are just don't want to have any um sense that little Johnny's misbehaving, and they're just almost in denial about it. Have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
I have.
Have you seen the one where Roy goes in with his little niece to talk to the teacher? And it's gets a lot of social play. And I have to do this in a really tactful way. He goes in and he says, "What's the problem?" And she says she swears a lot. And he says, "Really?" And she said the teacher said, "Yeah, he called this little boy in the school an apoplectic um SFer." That's the name. And, and he says, "Is he?" And she goes, "Oh God, yes." But that's not the point. And and then she says, "Where do you think he's learning or she's learning that?" And she looks at him and she doesn't, it's really a clever little bit of acting because she looks at him and she kind of tilts her head. And then all of a sudden the lights go on and he goes, "Me?" And then he goes, "Ah." And I thought it was really good, kind of emblematic of what you see is that the kid, as much as the teachers are leaning into these kids, you're trying to create this experience and things, but that scripting that's happening at home is such a foundational um, uh, uh, North Star in terms of the people that they're developing into. And how do you, as a district, how do you approach that when you've got this sort of shift in terms of responsibility? I mean, I think there's a tendency for people to blame the teachers. Going back to the diversity thing, people were blaming the district. It's like, you think they're teaching racism at the school? Is it possible that little Johnny's a racist little jerk because he's maybe hearing this from at home? So how do you, and that's an extreme example, but how do
Yep.
you approach that when you've got this kind of shifting accountability at home? That was a very long way of getting to the
No,
question, but I wanted to give it context.
yeah, I think one thing I want to say is, I'm a parent and my kids are experiencing the world differently than I did. I didn't have social media. I didn't have access to my friends all the time. They called my landline, so like my mom and dad could manage who was calling and what time they were calling.
She's
And
not
so,
here. Hang
yeah,
up.
or it's 8:30,
Yeah, right, right.
and I know for me, thinking about my child having a smartphone because I want to be able to put them on Life 360 so I know where they're at, or all the things that we didn't experience as children, we're parenting in. And so I think it's easy to point fingers at parents and saying they're deflecting or they're not taking ownership. And I think we're all just figuring out how to parent our kid in a world that we didn't live in. And so I think there's a both and in this situation. I think that we are all, and we're out of, I don't want to minimize the pandemic. Like it's over, and there are things that what happened to our kids out of the pandemic? For some of our kids, nothing. And for a lot of our kids, it really was impactful. And so I think as parents and as educators, we're trying to see what this new thing is in front of us. And what I do believe is that our partnership is really critical. Our relationships are really critical. Our authentic conversations are really critical. And I think we can figure it out together in partnership. And of course, there's always been 100 years. When I taught 20 years ago, there was always a parent who thought their child was perfect and they weren't. And we have that now too. So I think things have changed, but I think our kids have changed. And I think we're parenting in a time that we just can't even imagine. I don't even know what my kids are going through when I think about the stressors of social media. One of the things that I'm sure people are talking about all the time, I'm super curious about reading this book, The Anxious Generation. And I listened to the podcast of the author, and I mean, I'm just so curious about what we've done to our kids through this cell phone idea. And I think that we're navigating something we've never navigated before. And so I do think sometimes our parents, guilty of it too, just don't understand our kids all the time because we didn't do it.
No, and I think that's a great answer. I just finished a book called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari, and he was talking about how it's how challenging it is for people to pay attention, kids especially when they're digital natives and the parents are giving them an iPad to placate them at the store, and how all of these companies and these programs and apps are designed to grab and hold on to that attention, and that you get this little dopamine rush with the likes and the comments and things, and how addictive that is, and the impact of that in terms of just, engagement and learning and focus and concentration, and how challenging it is. So I wasn't trying to pick on any particular parent. But just the idea of,
Yep.
we're in this environment where, we're in this kind of alternate facts world sometimes, and then you're also you're dealing with forces that are very sophisticated, that are competing for that bandwidth.
Well,
So
and I think education is it's so critical. It's the foundation. We spend more time with other people's children during the school year, 100%. And so there is this really critical key partnership that's important. But, just think about AI. I mean, now all of a sudden AI is on the scene, and our teachers are having to learn how to navigate now another thing as they're navigating kids who are touchy and different, and show up with all kinds of family experiences and cultural experiences. And so
well, and
education is hard.
maturing at different levels, and
Yeah.
just yeah,
Yes,
it's
our teachers are really talented, but that's one of the things about education. I always say this is everybody has an opinion about education because they went to school, but our teachers and our educators, they are really talented and skilled. It is not something that you just walk in and do. And I think that is what is hard. That is what parents need to remember, is that these are professionally educated human beings who have a skill set to teach. And that there's a lot to it. And when you put 25 and 30 kids in front of someone, to your point, maturing at different things, different family, all these experiences that come into one
economics,
space.
cultural,
Yeah. Our teachers are so talented. Our educators are so talented. And it's really critical. It's not just like I show up one day.
Sure, sure. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're on a tight timeline, but is there anything that you wish we used to, when we started the podcast, we called it the beer question. It's like if you were sitting in someone's living room and having a
Yeah.
beer, what would you want them to know? What would you want to leave people with? What's that kind of like, I wish more people knew this.
Yeah, I love that question. I guess I want to go back to the first question you asked me, which was what do you grade the district on? I guess one of the things I would say is and you said it so nicely, the adjacent districts to Eastern Carver County, we're not less than them. We are a excellent school district and provide an excellent education for our students. And that is what I wish everyone talked about and knew. There's a lot of comparison games in education. And I believe that our schools, our leaders, our educators are providing our kids with a first class excellent education that is competitive with our adjacent districts. And so that is what I wish people would talk about.
We talk about that a lot. Like one of the districts, it's like if you've got brown eyes, you're diversity. And and you're dealing with I personally I was very happy with the education that my kids received here because I thought it was beyond the academics. It taught them to function in a world where not everybody, gets to go to Florida to see grandma and grandpa in Boca and has a cabin up north or goes to Europe on spring
Yeah.
break, that they have to function in a more diverse and multicultural and more nuanced world. And I thought that they got that. And one of my pet peeves is when people talk about average scores, because averages are just terrible. I mean, right? If you and I and Bill Gates get in an elevator on average, we're all billionaires, but that's not really reflective of what's really going on. And I think so I love that as a parting shot. That's one of the things that we cheerlead about the district when we're working with clients and they're considering the area. So, is there anything else that you'd like to say before I have to let you go?
Well, make sure that if you're listening, that you come and do my community engagement and answer my 100-day plan, where I'm asking the community for important questions about the district, and your voice will be really critical as I learn about what's next for the organization.
Can maybe Kelly can send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes.
Great.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Erin. This was
Thank
really fun.
you.
I'm delighted that we were able to do this. I'm going to stop recording right now.
Okay.